And then last month, they were convicted in their federal hate crimes trial, which centered on the men targeting Arbery because of his race. Well, now that Michael's attorneys, they filed motions for an acquittal of the hate crimes convictions. Part of their argument is that the killing did not happen on a public street. Here's what the motion says. Quote, the government also failed to prove that Satilla Drive, Holmes Road, and Burford Road, the streets at issue in this case, were conclusively public streets. It goes on to say that although the government showed evidence that the Glynn County Department of Public Works received work orders regarding those roads and listed them as public streets, the government completely failed to rebut the fact that Glynn County formally rejected ownership of those roads over 60 years ago. Therefore, the government failed to prove an essential element of count one, which warrants a judgment of acquittal as to defendant Gregory McMichael. Similarly for Travis McMichael in the motion on behalf of him as well. So still with us in studio, our criminal defense attorney and law professor from Emory University, Molly Palmer, joining us. And we also want to welcome in this hour from Phoenix, Arizona, former criminal defense attorney who represented Jodi Arias, Kirk Nurmi, joining us over here. Thanks so much for being with us, Kirk. Okay, so
thank you, Joy. Good to see you.
Nice to see you. So, Kirk, since we haven't heard from you, what is your initial reaction to what's happening with the McMichaels and this attempt to get this conviction thrown out on the basis of this technicality?
You know, ultimately, Joy, we're talking about jurisdiction here. Does the federal government have jurisdiction over these passageways, this area, because they're not quote unquote public highways? What strikes me with this is why wasn't this raised earlier? Typical a lack of jurisdiction. It's a very academic kind of thing that really never plays itself out in the courtroom. At least I never experienced it. But ultimately, Joy, this is something that should be litigated before trial begins, because if the government lacks jurisdiction, then therefore the trial shouldn't take place. So it seems kind of backwards that now that the defense is saying, wait a minute, you didn't prove this element, when ultimately they could have made these same arguments in advance of trial.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. Molly, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with Kirk. It's interesting because this is hyper-technical, but this is what federal practice is all about. And so I think that they're paving the way for an appeal to the 11th Circuit that's going to hinge on the sufficiency of the indictment and the proof that the federal prosecutors had. But, I mean, I do think it would have been better situated as a pretrial motion. And at the end of the day, they're already found guilty of state charges and serving life. So it will not undo the fact that these two men are going to be in prison.
And actually, I'm really glad that you raised this. Kirk, I was wondering, you know, because it's not going to undo the fact that these men are going to be in prison, why are they pushing so hard, you know, filing this appeal?
Right. Well, I guess it's always done with the hope that maybe those state convictions will be overturned as well, and then there'll be no convictions against their client. So they're going to want to pursue every angle they can. We saw certainly a vigorous defense put forward in the state case. We didn't get to see that in the federal case because there was no cameras, but we can assume that they did the same. So we see these defense attorneys fighting tooth and nail for these clients, and ultimately it's done with the idea that their hope that these convictions will get overturned and that their clients will be set free.
Yeah, and Molly, what's your take on it?
Well, I think as criminal defense lawyers, not only do we zealously advocate for our clients, but we are supposed to be a check on the federal government or the state government and prosecutors. And so we have a duty and obligation to say, listen, you didn't prove this, your indictment is insufficient, and it's not just because we're fighting for our client, it's because we're the ones who come into court and make sure that everybody else is doing their job as the Constitution demands it.
Very interesting. And, you know, obviously we don't want to forget the victim in this case, Ahmaud Arbery himself. Court TV's Julia Janae has a closer look at actually what happened on the day in question that led to all of this.
It was video that shook the world. A young black man running down the street confronted by two armed white men.
Hello. 911, what's the address of emergency? I'm out here at Satilla Shores. There's a black male running down the street.
That's the voice of Greg McMichael calling 911. Moments later,
Stop, what's that? Is it? Stop. Travis!
a shotgun blast. Then two more before the runner, Ahmaud Arbery, falls to the ground fatally wounded. McMichael and his son Travis were pursuing Arbery on the streets of Satilla Shores, Georgia.
Travis, Roddy's got it on film.
Roddy is William Roddy Bryan, the neighbor who joined the chase and at some point pulled out his cell phone and started recording.
Should we been chasing him? I don't know.
Police were on the scene soon after the shooting, and their body cameras record the three men explaining how the shooting happened.
Dad was outside, saw him running by, and the neighbors pointing and everything. So
saw who running by?
Him.
Okay.
So we run out to stop him, to talk to him. He took off running. He came over here. Stopped. He come out of the truck running at us. I told him stop till he hit me. I had nothing to do. There's nothing else I can do.
If I could have got a shot at the guy, I shot him myself.
Gregory and Travis tell police they believe the man they were chasing might have burglarized an unfinished house in their neighborhood.
This is not home invasion. This is murder.
Arbery's heartbroken family said police initially told them Ahmaud was killed by a homeowner during a home invasion. That explanation didn't sit well with Arbery's relatives, who called him Quez.
He said, yeah, Quez got killed in a home invasion, trying to break in somebody's neighbor's house. So I said, no, that's not Quez.
This is surveillance video from inside that construction site minutes before the deadly chase. Arbery looks around, takes nothing, then takes off running past the McMichaels' front yard.
I knew that something wasn't right because I had just lost my son.
Arbery's mother, Wanda Cooper Jones, pushed for answers, but local prosecutors seem to be stalling in the days and weeks later.
And this is the attitude that I have from the party who's responsible for helping me. And this is the reaction that I'm getting. So I knew that something was going on that wasn't right.
Then, in early May 2020, more than 70 days after Arbery's death, Brian's cell phone video went viral, sparking outrage and protests.
I run with Mud! I run with Mud!
Calls for justice exploded across the country.
These men were in fact motivated by racism, that they are deeply rooted in a culture of racism that dictated their actions.
Amid the outcry, a new team of investigators and prosecutors examined the shooting. All three men were arrested and indicted on 9 counts, including malice murder, felony murder, and false imprisonment. Prosecutors allege the recordings prove the men chased and hunted Arbery before killing him. But the defense has a different take on the evidence.
So he went out that day with his son, Travis, to detain Ahmaud Arbery long enough for the police to arrive.
He was the baby. Anything he called his mama for, his daddy, his brother, uncle, he got it. My son had dreams. That's why he worked out. He ran. He had dreams. When you kill in my family, what else can you do to me? That's why justice got to be served.
Yeah, I mean, it's so heartbreaking, you know, every time you hear from the family and see the video, it's just so disturbing and painful. And I guess, you know, what's happening with the federal case, it also relates in some way to what's happening with the state case. There was a conviction on murder and there were life sentences handed down. But how could these play into each other?
Well, it's interesting because under Georgia state law, it was Ahmaud Arbery's death that resulted in us passing hate crime legislation. And so they were not tried in the state on a hate crime. And so now we're seeing post-conviction litigation done about, was it prejudicial? Was the state bringing in evidence of racial animus that they shouldn't have when it's just a straightforward murder case? So we are going to continue to see a lot of post-conviction litigation, both on the state level and on the federal level, but for two very different reasons.
So, Kirk, do you agree with that? Do you think that we're just gonna, this is really kind of the first in a long list of appeals?
I think so. I think Molly hit the nail on the head. We are going to see these, as she said, you know, check on the government's authority. We are going to see these attorneys pursue everything they can in defense of their clients at the appellate level, both at the federal and state level, so they can litigate these issues fully.
Yeah, you know, something else we were discussing is that these defendants are kind of situating themselves a little bit differently, actually. You know, the attorney for Greg McMichael said, in part, in his filing, that under the terms of count 1 and the statute upon which it's based, that the government needed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that defendant Gregory McMichael interfered with Mr. Arbery because of his color, and that they didn't do that. And they basically pointed to evidence presented against the other two defendants, Travis McMichael, his own son, and their neighbor, that wasn't presented against Greg. So What is the significance of this, trying to kind of differentiate these defendants from each other?
Well, you know, that's what you do as a defense lawyer. Every single individual charged is entitled to their own counsel. And oftentimes what we do in co-defendant cases is throw the others under the bus. You know, that's part of our strategy. And so we're going to see, I think, as we move through the appellate level and see this kind of litigation, they're going to continue to try and differentiate themselves and say, listen, this might have been fair to the other two for their convictions, but not for me and not for my client. So I think it's just strategy, and I think we're going to see it throughout both the 11th Circuit appeal and the Georgia Court of Appeals filings as well.
Kirk, do you agree with that? I mean, we're talking about father and son here.
I agree, Joy, but you know, one of the things that happens at trial, and especially when there's convictions take place, it becomes every defendant for themselves. And the appellate court process becomes much more sterile. So it becomes intellectual arguments instead of father going after son at trial. It becomes these intellectual arguments made to a court. And yes, each defendant in this case, the three of them, are going to try to differentiate themselves from the other one to kind of carve out a distinction. So meaning that would grant them relief with the appellate court.
All right, well, thank you both for breaking this down with us. You know, still ahead, fireworks in the courtroom. Convicted hoaxer Jussie Smollett erupting in court after the judge's lengthy statement and a 150-day jail sentence. When we return, we break down the dramatic events of yesterday's sentencing hearing here on Court TV Live.
Off.